What's up, guys? Welcome to G Whiskey. My name is Jeff. Now, this is a channel where I offer my thoughts and opinions on a specific whiskey, and if you stick around to the end, I'll be giving it a score as well. That sounds interesting. Hit subscribe down below. And with that out of the way, why don't we jump into our review? Today, we're looking at GlenAllachie 15-year-old. Stick around. So we've got a GlenAllachie with us today. GlenAllachie, kind of an interesting distillery. They're pretty new to the single malt scene. The distillery itself has been around for a little while, but as a single malt brand, they're pretty new. And it seems like they're trying to position themselves as kind of like the next GlenDronach or something. Now, a big reason for that is that the old master distiller from GlenDronach, a guy named Billy Walker, actually bought out the GlenAllachie distillery a few years back, I think about 5 years ago, and he's been working his magic there ever since. Now, these guys are known for their deeply sherried whiskeys, and as far as I'm concerned, I think they're going to be a very interesting distiller to watch over the next few years, over the next decade or so. And that's because when they bought the place out about 5 years ago, of course, they did have a lot of older stock on hand from the previous owners, but that stock was not made to their specifications. So the core range that we're getting from them now is just them kind of dealing with what was already there, maybe slapping a finish on it, doing what they can, tweaking it, and then putting it out there as fast as they could. And that's not to say that the core range that we've got from them now is somehow bad or sloppily made. In fact, it's the opposite. It's been pretty well received by consumers. But like I said, for the core range we've got from them now, it is based on that older stock. They didn't control the entire process from distillation to bottling. So it might be a little while, it could be years before we start to see their sort of original vision for this whiskey start to take shape, which is why I think it's going to be an interesting whiskey to watch evolve over the coming decade or so. And even with the stuff that's already out, we're still seeing some changes happen. The 12 has gotten a lot darker over the last year or so. Now the 10 and the 12 are going to be the youngest members of their core range, so of course the changes will affect those first. But I think in a few years we'll start seeing changes in the 15 and eventually the 18 as well. Now, coming back around to the 15 specifically, this is a 2019 release. It's been finished in both Oloroso and PX or Pedro Jimenez hogshead barrels, so we can expect a very sherried whiskey here. And I love me a good hit of sherry. So with that said, why don't we hop into a review of this one, see what it's all about, and in the meantime, if you can kindly leave a like down below, that'd be greatly appreciated. Nice thing about GlenAllachie, they're pretty consistent with their specs. This one's no different. We get an ABV here of 46%. It's going to be a non-chill filtered expression, and our color here is natural, as is the norm from these guys. So you can see the color there. This is a very dark whiskey. If you saw my review of the 10-year-old, you know that I'm not really a fan of these bottles. I know it's a different font, but I'm still getting Flintstones vibes from the label here. I guess the blue on the 15 is slightly better than what the green on the 10 and the purple on the 12. It's a little bit better, but no, it's still tacky, and my presentation score here is 1.5 out of 5. But I will say, at least for info, we're looking okay here. We have natural color over here, we have non-chill filtered here. Oftentimes we'll only get one of the two or none, so it's nice to have both here. Beyond that, it would be nice if they mentioned the Oloroso and PX cast that they used to finish this whiskey in. There's no mention of that anywhere on the label. That would be nice. But yeah, overall, I don't love the look of this bottle. I can't say I'm a fan. Alright, let's try our nose here. So big sherry for sure. Yeah, so like classic sherry notes, you're getting baking spices, Christmas cake, red fruits, nuts, raisins, dates, that kind of thing. Chewy tobacco, orange flavored dark chocolate, and maybe some toffee. And you do have kind of like a bitter or sour element in here too. I want to say something like sour grapes, maybe some bitter herbs, some rhubarb. All right, let's try our palate. Okay. Your texture here is pretty watery. Flavor-wise, you're getting a big hit of sweet sherry, so like sweet raisins, caramel, milk chocolate, and some honey drizzled dates, and maybe some wet oak in there. Let's try the finish. Okay, getting more peppery here, so like white pepper, ginger spice, maybe some chili as well. We also have some of those bitter notes from the nose starting to slip back in, so like bitter herbs, some wet oak in here, and maybe some roasted nuts as well. Lingering, we're getting some dried red fruits and some wet tobacco here. In terms of length, I would say this is about medium in length. So if you want a lot of sherry, you are getting it here. This is a big, sweet, sugary sherry. The casks in this have definitely been very, very active. The spirit itself doesn't really have that much to say, but this is a great whiskey if you want a sugar rush. I gotta say, this one wavers pretty dramatically between those really sweet notes and those bitter notes, all of which have been imparted by the cask. In this, the sherry basically takes over everything. Beyond that, it's all a little bit simple. The nose is actually really interesting, but personally speaking, the palate and the finish don't really deliver for me. So my score here is going to be 83. I honestly wanted to like this whiskey so much more than I actually do. You definitely do get big sherry here, but it doesn't feel like the kind of sherry that's been slowly and carefully interacting with the spirit over a long time. It feels more like someone's kind of taken some sherry flavored syrup and dumped it into the whiskey. It's sweet, it's sugary, it's intense. You get a lot of those big sugary notes up top, and it is kind of satisfying, but it's satisfying in like the simplest of ways. I feel like this is the kind of whiskey I probably would have enjoyed in my first like 1 or 2 years as a whiskey drinker, just because it does give you that big visceral hit of sherry, and I think a lot of people out there will like it for that reason. But as far as I'm concerned, it's fast food, it's pretty basic, it's satisfying in a very superficial way, but you know, to its credit, in a McDonald's cheeseburger kind of way, it does actually hit the spot. Now, I've seen a few reviewers out there compare stuff like GlenAllachie 15 to things like Tamdhu 15 or GlenDronach 15. As far as I'm concerned, stuff like this is in a completely different category of whiskey. These are going to be deeply sherried, but they work with that intrinsic character of the distillery. Whereas something like GlenAllachie, for me, it's been completely overwhelmed by its sherry casks. Not only that, I find the body here very watery. The actual maltiness of this whiskey behind that curtain of sherry doesn't have much heft or much weight to it. I tried this next to the newer, darker version of the GlenAllachie 12-year-old, and by contrast, the 12-year-old was much more substantial, much more complex. This one came off as watery and dumbed down. Now, I know I'm ragging on this whiskey quite a bit, but I will say this, there is some potential there, but certainly there's room for improvement. First of all, the texture. I wish this had a thicker, weightier texture, more heft behind that maltiness. Second, I find the sherry here pretty loud. Now, loud sherry can work. I like a big, sweet, fruity sherry bomb, but in here it comes off sweet. I find it cloying. And third, I wish this let the GlenAllachie spirit talk more. It's been completely overwhelmed by the casks. Now, to be fair, this could be a similar case with the 12-year-old where we just have to give it a little bit more time and it will eventually get better. The newer, darker batches of the 12-year-old are a massive step up from those older ones. So who knows, maybe in a few years, we'll be seeing a vastly improved version of the 15-year-old. But for now, what we've got is a very sherried whiskey with very little subtlety, very little nuance to it. I'm not going to recommend it. I think there are better sherried whiskeys out there. A lot of them are going to be younger and or cheaper. Now, clearly, I'm not a big fan of this, so you might think I'm inclined to bash it for value, but I think value, it's not that bad. I think it's a pretty reasonable price for a 15-year-old, but it's not to my taste, and I won't be buying it again. Not only that, I will recommend other whiskeys before I would recommend this one. I think there's better, cheaper alternatives to this, and even just within GlenAllachie itself, the 12-year-olds that I just mentioned, the newer, darker batches of it, are fantastic. Alright, that'll be it for me today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. As always, hit subscribe down below, click that little bell icon, and of course, smash the like. Now, I do want to hear from you. Have you tried GlenAllachie 15-year-old? How would you compare it to the 12-year-old? And finally, down in the comments, let me know what you want to see me review next, and I'll keep it in mind for my upcoming videos. Bye, guys.